So just to be clear before I get started, I am not a therapist. So my knowledge is in the education field. So I do not diagnose, I do not prescribe. My knowledge is simply just to support student education setting. So today I'm going to be reviewing a handout. It's an informational handout with signs, tips, and resources for parents regarding warning signs of different mental health issues to be aware of with their students. My hope is that you'll have a little more insight as to what to look for, how to respond, and ways to get help if you need it. So like Mrs. Hammond said, I will be stopping periodically through the presentation to give you guys a chance to ask questions or share any comments, concerns that you have. I may not have all the answers today, but I am always happy to do some digging for you to get the answers that you would need. So I'm going to try and share my screen here. Bear with me. All right, so this is the handout that I'm going to be going over. I'm going to go over the points in the handout and then elaborate on each one to give you a little bit more information about them. So you'll see that it says Understanding Mental Health in Children, a guide for parents at home. And you'll see the first thing it says is due to the school closure. This was a handout that Fresno County actually created last year when the schools closed, but I still find that the information is really applicable to our situation now. So that's why I wanted to use this as a tool for us to have a conversation today. So here you'll see it says know the signs. So that's the first thing I want to go over is just what are some of the signs that you as parents and teachers also can be aware of at home and at school. So the first thing here, it says a decrease in energy or activity. So I wanted to break that down a little bit. So maybe your student has always been pretty upbeat, energetic, active, but lately they've seemed more lethargic, more complacent. Maybe they'd rather just prefer to be on the couch versus doing things that they used to love doing. So that's definitely a sign that something might be bothering them that needs some attention. Under that, it says crying frequently. That sounds pretty self-explanatory, but again, this would be in regards to a student that wasn't really prone to being overly emotional in the past. And now it just seems like they cry really easily and you've seen a really drastic shift in their behavior. So that could be an indicator that something deeper is going on. The next one over here says having trouble sleeping or relaxing. Now I will say that particular thing definitely affected me. Last year when the pandemic really first impacted us, I've never really had problems sleeping. I'm very fortunate in that regard. But when the pandemic first hit, I was having a really hard time sleeping at night. And I actually found that there was a term for it called coronasomnia. That was the thing that came out last year. And I talked to a lot of students and a lot of parents that said that they were struggling with the same thing. So that was probably just some underlying anxiety and some worry about what was going on in the world and what was going to happen. So if that's something that you've noticed with your student, where they're having a hard time unwinding, a hard time relaxing, that's definitely a sign that something could be going on. The next one is an increase in anger or irritability. So if your student has always been pretty level-headed, rational, calm, and now they seem to maybe have a short fuse, maybe they snap more often or more easily, that could be a signal that there's something going on that needs to be addressed. So over here, you'll see it says increased worry. So again, maybe your student has always been happy-go-lucky, things didn't seem to really bother them or make them anxious, but now it seems like they tend to get really nervous, they tend to worry a lot. That's definitely a sign that they might need some help. One thing that I hear a lot from parents, especially over the last year, is that their student complains to them that they're worried that somebody in their family is going to get sick, or maybe they're going to catch COVID, or maybe somebody in their family has had COVID and now they're worried about their loved ones also getting COVID. So that's that increased worry, whereas before they might not have been that nervous about getting sick, and now you're seeing them talk about that a lot. I've had students at other sites that haven't really wanted to leave the home. They haven't wanted to go out in public. That's when I say that's a deeper issue, that's kind of what I mean, is it's really impacting their life on a broad scale. It's impacting their everyday activities. So in that situation, I always tell parents, that's a valid worry for them to be concerned about that. We as adults have been worried about that for over a year now. So our kids are definitely picking up on that, and they're going to be worried too. So it's our job to reassure them that we're going to keep them safe and that we're going to do everything we can to make sure that they're healthy and happy. So the next thing that you'll see over here says blaming others. And I know some parents might be thinking, well, this isn't new. My kid blames their brother or their sister, or maybe even the dog, anytime they think that they're going to get in trouble for something. But this item is really more in regards to students that are deflecting their emotions, kind of putting it out on other people, and not being able to really regulate themselves, like regulate their emotions and be able to accept, things themselves. They've kind of put it off on other people. So if your student has typically been pretty responsible for themselves and for their emotions, and lately that seems like it's changed, that's what this one is referring to. Difficulty communicating, that's the piece under here. This one is huge, and I'm going to talk about that a lot as we go on throughout the presentation. I can't stress enough right now the importance of communication. And I know that this can be really difficult. As adults, this is difficult. Communication is something that we're always working on and trying to get better at, but it's really important for us to keep the lines of communication open with our kids. We want them to know that we're here to support them. If your student is really opposed to communicating, or maybe they're acting out instead of coming to talk to you about things, that's a sign that they can't express themselves adequately. They don't have the skills to do that. And maybe before that wasn't a problem, but now you're seeing all of these problems with just being able to talk about how they feel. So that's definitely a signal that something is going on. So those are just some of the signs. Again, these are not diagnoses. These are just possible indicators that there's some problems that your student is dealing with that need to be addressed. It could be that they're just going through some emotional stuff that will resolve, or it could be an indication that they might need ongoing support through a therapist or through some other kind of supports and services. Last year, there was local data that came out from places like school districts and Valley Children's Hospital, and they saw a huge increase in diagnosable depression and anxiety. So before, they might have just seen kids that had, some temporary issues with worrying about a situation, but now they're seeing a huge spike in the numbers of kids that can be actually diagnosed with depression and anxiety. So that's just what's happening in our community. The other one that's a little bit more somber is that there was a huge increase in suicidal attempts last year in our schools with our students here in the Valley. And I don't want to scare anybody. I don't want anybody to be worried about this, but I do want us to be aware that this is going on in our community and it's affecting our students. And that's why I think it's important for us to have this conversation, because we need to know what are the signs that our student could be struggling so that we can get them the support and be able to help them out. So that was lots of different quick bullet points of information. I'm going to stop sharing for a second. If anybody has questions about those signs, if you need me to clarify something, if you need just anything that you want to bring up about that, now would be a great time. I'm also going to drop my email in the chat box. So if you need to email me later on with some questions, or if you need more resources, you can connect with me that way. So I will stop sharing so I can see everybody. Put my email in the chat. Okay, so moving on. I wanted to go over some proactive strategies that you can try at home. So, and again, this is not an exhaustive list. This is just a few things that have been helpful for other people that Fresno County included on their handout to go out to parents. So the first one here is to maintain routines. Sleeping, eating, class time, homework time, we all function better when we have a routine to stick to. As adults, if our routine is thrown off, we don't know what to expect in our days, and it can give us some anxiety. So it's even more so that our kids are going to experience that kind of discombobulated, thrown off, anxious, what is my day going to look like kind of mentality. So routines give us a sense of normalcy. And especially in the times that we're living in, we need as much of that normalcy as we can get. So it helps us to stay focused instead of becoming distracted with what's going on in the world. And I know it's very easy to become distracted with what's going on in the world. We have social media, we have TV, we have all kinds of outlets that we're getting all kinds of information all the time. So the more we can have a routine that we can fall back on, the better. And I talk a lot about this with parents because there's been a lot of studies that show the importance of having routines, especially when it comes to sleep. That's a really, really critical piece for our kids. And the better we can be at setting those schedules as parents, as teachers, the more regulated they'll be with their emotions. Movement. This is a great one. We've got, well, the weather today is better. I think we can actually see blue in the sky. So we're moving in the right direction, right? And we're coming up on a very small window of time in the Fresno area where we actually have like good weather where we can get outside and enjoy it. So I definitely recommend taking advantage of the great weather that we're going to have. I also tell parents all the time, put down that device. And I tell parents that, and I'm very guilty of that as well. I'm working on it. It's a work in progress. But making a point to have time away from our screens. I know the other day, there was some social media outlets that like crashed for the day. And some people were like, oh my gosh, the sun is out. And I like put down my phone and I went and did things. So that's kind of the same thing that we're talking about here, making it movement part of your daily life and your routine. There was actually an article that came out last year, 2020, from the New York Times. And they had talked to some psychologists at the time that were looking at what it was going to be like when students came back for in-person learning. And the study showed, the article showed that they were actually very nervous that students were actually going to experience withdrawal-like symptoms, that they were going to have withdrawals from not being in front of their screen all day. You know, even now, we're all communicating through Zoom, we're on a screen. And so shifting to come back to in-person, having to focus on a teacher, having to interact with peers, that's a different skill set than sitting in front of a computer. So the more we can put down our devices and get up and move and interact with one another, the better it's going to be for our mental health. So with that, I always say, you know, it can be creative. It doesn't have to be going to the gym. It doesn't have to be lifting weights. It can be everybody put on your shoes, we're going to take the dog for a walk. Or it can be something really creative, like we're going to make an obstacle course in the house and we're going to time each other and we're going to have a lot of fun with it. So there's lots of things that you can do to encourage your students to get up and move, get them excited about it. So that's a great tip. So the next one I'm going to talk about is parent self-care. Oh my gosh, this one is huge. I've talked a lot about this with parents over the years, not just when COVID started, but way before that, because I truly believe that our students they're watching us. They're absorbing all of our energy, positive or negative. And so it's really important for us to take care of our mental health needs because that will in turn affect them. I know for myself, I've had a couple of times students that I've been sitting at my desk working and I have not been aware of my body language or maybe my face. Maybe I've been concentrating on something and my students will come up to me and go, Miss A, are you okay? And I go, yeah, I'm fine. Why do you ask me that? And they said, oh, you just look like you were upset about something. And then I thought, oh my gosh, what does that say about my face that I look like I'm upset all the time? I have to work on that. But they were aware. They were looking at my body language. They were looking at my face. So our kids are watching us. And so we have to be really aware of making sure that we're not transferring any energy that we don't want to go to them. So really prioritizing well-being as a family. What does that look like? Engaging in healthy activities that promote positive feelings. Maybe that's reading a book. Maybe that's listening to music or talking to other adults, other friends. That's taking care of yourself and your mental health. I love teaching kids about mindfulness and exercises like deep breathing techniques, guided meditation, progressive muscle relaxation. And I'll break those down in a little bit. I know some of you might be like, I've never heard of those things before. So all of those are available online. YouTube is my best friend. I find tons of resources on YouTube, but those are a great way to kind of talk about how do we calm down? How do we practice care? There's lots of tips online for that. So talking with your children. This one is huge also. Communication is a big one. We really want to be open and honest with our kids, but we also want to be gentle in our approach. Like I said, they are aware of what's going on. They know what's happening in the world. They all know about COVID. They all know that we have to be safe and careful. So if we forget that they're absorbing all of that energy from us, it's going to sit with them and it's going to make it even more difficult for them to communicate. So if we're not talking to them about how they're doing, what they're feeling, we're really missing an opportunity to connect with them and to support them. So I know that oftentimes we'll just say, you know, how are you? And that's great, but I would encourage you to take it a step farther. Really create a safe space to talk to your child about their concerns, what questions they might have. They might not understand everything that's going on in the world, but they just know that it's scary. So giving them a chance to talk about that is really important. Schedule special time with your child. They just want your attention. They want that connection with you. So creating time in the day when it's not school time or it's not work time, it's just time for you to connect. That's really important. We also want to be able to reassure them that we're here for them, that we're here to support them. And if they don't feel like they can talk to us, that we're happy to get them somebody to talk to. And I know that it's hard, especially as parents, to be able to have the right words to say to your kid. So in this PDF here, you can see that there's guidelines, there's conversation starters, there's things that you can look up to help you with those conversations. The last one here is positive moments. So they have a couple recommendations here: playing games, cooking or baking something together. In fact, I was thinking about this earlier. I don't know if anybody watches the show Nailed It on Netflix, where people try and create like really elaborate baking competition things. It's really, really funny. And I always think that would be a great family game night activity to have like a baking challenge. So just creating fun moments like that with your children is really important. There's a grief expert that I've been following some of his work. His name is David Kessler. And he had a podcast that he was on recently. And he said something that really stood out to me. And he said, we have to be intentional about creating meaningful moments. We can't just sit back and wait for them to happen organically. We have to take steps to create them. It doesn't have to be a big thing. It can be a very small thing, like setting up a video chat with family members that aren't nearby, or maybe, you know, playing games at night as a family. But you are intentionally setting that time aside for that moment. And that's what's really important. It also, when we create those moments, it gives us a chance to develop opportunities to be grateful. I'm grateful that we have this moment now. You know, this was intentionally set up and you're all here, and I'm glad that I get to share this with you. So this is an opportunity to be grateful, to have this conversation. And that's also great to have that conversation with kids. Hey, this was something to be grateful for. What else are you grateful for? Let's talk about that. So those are just a handful of suggestions, but they're great, easy places to start. well, maybe not easy for everybody, but I really do believe that with practice and persistence that it will get easier. So I'm going to pause again. Anybody have any questions? I'm going to stop sharing so I can see everybody. Is there any questions that I can answer for anybody so far?
I have something, Kara.
Yes.
I love all the positive, ideas going on here, but I want to get back to the social media issue. And I'm wondering, the last that I read in the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, Mental Disorders, I don't know what is the most recent version, but they had not really developed a criteria for social media addiction. In fact, they are not even calling it that. But where are we at? That was like 2018, I think. Where are we at? And can you give maybe folks some tips to begin to understand when this is a real critical issue, what behaviors they might be looking for to better understand if that it has become, in fact, an addiction, and then tips as to what to do about it. I think you did touch on that, but what is that? Have they developed a criteria yet for that?
That's a great question. And kudos to you for knowing the Diagnostical Statistics Manual. I'm very impressed. Gold star. That's wonderful. I haven't heard of any or read any research on any social media addiction diagnoses, but I know that that's something that there currently is a lot of ongoing long-term research studies on. So I think that we will see that in the next manual. They will probably start making that an actual diagnosis. I do know that they are looking at things like video games, like that is something that could be considered an addiction now. But I think where you draw the line is kind of like with any other addiction. And again, not a therapist, so I can't diagnose, but what I would say is that if you have a student that cannot stop playing video games to do other everyday activities because they're so focused on this video game, that's really concerning. I know that there's a lot of gamers that will go for, a whole day and they're just with their buddies and they're playing. That's a little bit different when you have withdrawal, like, oh my gosh, I haven't been playing, I need to get back to my game. That mentality is a little bit different than just, a 24-hour game day with your friends. So when it starts to impact your ability to be able to focus on your classes or go out and see other people because you just have to focus on that game, that's where it gets a little bit sticky, I think. And then you asked about tips. I'm a really big advocate of limiting exposure to all of those things. I never want to take that away completely from kids, especially now. Social media it's even though we don't want them to be on it all day, that's still a way that our kids are engaging with one another. They're still interacting with people. They talk to their friends, they, see what's going on in the world. So I think that giving them that option as an outlet is beneficial, but having them take breaks, having them have a set time limit. Okay, you've been on for 30 minutes, you need to get off and go read, or you need to go play outside. Or maybe, all day long you've hit, however many hours that you want to set as a parent, you've hit your limit for the day. Another tip that I really love is when parents say, okay, if you want more social media time or more game time, you need to do X, Y, and Z. You need to finish your homework, then you can have more time. Then you need to do your chores, then you can have more time. I also know some parents that will disconnect the Wi-Fi at the end of the day, or the kids have to do chores to earn the password to the Wi-Fi. So there's different things like that where they can be really involved in limiting the amount of time that their kids are on screens. Does that answer your question? Okay. So the last thing that I wanted to go over, I know that I'm running low on time, but I did want to talk about, hold on. I want to make sure, Nancy, I see your question. Nancy, you beat me to it. I'm just about to jump into some resources that parents can use when they notice these warning signs. That's a fabulous question. So let me get back to sharing my screen so that you guys can see what I'm talking about. All right. So here are some resources. Okay. Ways to reach out for help. So again, this is not an exhaustive list. This is just some of the local agencies that you can contact for help. I want to highlight a couple that I personally really like, and this might sound kind of funny, but I really like the suicide hotline. I know that sounds kind of funny to say, but the reason I like it is because they have a talk line and they have a text line, which I think is really, really important because adults, whoever, they might not always want to call. So having a text option is critical because they can get support right away. So I always give this resource out to parents and to students and say, if you ever need somebody to talk to, right here, text this number or call this number. And I think it was last month, we just had Suicide Awareness and Prevention Month. And so this is a really big conversation to be having right now, especially with all of the mental health needs that we're seeing in our community. Unfortunately, this is a really prevalent topic. So having this information is really, really important. Let's see, where's my next one? Fresno County. So the Fresno County icon is here. They also have a warm line to support people with behavioral health needs. And just going to the Fresno County Superintendent of Schools website, I'm always surprised when I go on that website because there's a lot of great resources that are local that we can use. So I always recommend just starting out with the Fresno County website. There's a lot of great things on there for you to check out. Besides these tools, there's a few more tools on here, a few more resources. I just wanted to share a couple of things that I personally like or that I use with students. So there's a happiness expert. His name is Sean Aker. And yes, that is actually his job. He gets to research happiness for a living. What a job. He has some great videos about happiness, gratitude, and things like that. They're wonderful and they're easy to implement. One of the strategies that he talks about is a gratitude journal. I personally started this in my own life and it has made a profound impact on me. His work, Sean Aker's work, has shown that when we make a practice of gratitude every day for 3 weeks, we actually begin to change the wiring in our brain to become happier and more grateful. Our brains start to look for things to be grateful for instead of defaulting to negative thoughts. So that's one tip. Mindfulness videos. I talked about this a little bit earlier. You can quite literally go to YouTube and type in mindfulness for kids, and you'll get tons of great options. I use these with my students all the time, and I tell them this might seem kind of silly at first, but once you start practicing it, you'll see huge benefits. I have seen the benefits with my students all the time. But you have to remember it is a practice. It's not a one-time fix. It's not a Band-Aid. It is a practice. But the good news is that practicing mindfulness can literally take seconds. It can be minutes. It can be a long extended time, or it can just be seconds of learning how to take deep breathing techniques and to help yourself. I also earlier, I mentioned guided meditation and progressive muscle relaxation. So I love doing both of those techniques when I need to calm down or when I need to just kind of unwind or de-stress. You can type those into YouTube. And if you want it for kids, you can just type guided meditation for kids or progressive muscle relaxation for kids. You'll get lots of great videos. So those are excellent ways to start out by learning about mindfulness. If you're looking for some exercise options, I personally love Yoga for Adrienne on YouTube. She has everything from yoga for kids all the way up to expert yogi level. I tend to go for the beginner stuff so that I can just do some stretches and feel like I was productive for the day. So that's my level. That's where I'm working at. Also, Go Noodle, like pasta noodle, Go Noodle. That's a great website. They have lots of fun games and exercises for students. I've seen that done in like a whole classroom setting, and the students are getting up and they're wiggling and being silly, and they love it. The last couple tips I had was, like I said, get creative. If you are a family that loves to get outside, I always recommend a day trip to the mountains. It's so refreshing to get back into nature and just connect as a family, or go to the beach. I personally always tell people I'm a big advocate of volunteering. So if you and your family are looking for something to do, volunteering at an animal shelter or volunteering at a shelter, a homeless shelter, those are great ways to give back and to teach your kids about giving back to the community. Or tradition like game night. You know, we're all inside right now, so starting a new tradition where everybody gets together for game night, that's a great way to connect and to communicate. So I know I'm a few minutes over my time. I'm going to stop there. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful that I got to spend this time with all of you. I'm going to drop my email into the chat one more time. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to stick around and answer them.
I saw one question in the chat from, I think, Mrs. Corley wanted to know, I think she's speaking about the presentation. She said, how can we get a copy of the newsletter? But I think she's meaning, is that correct, Ms. Corley? Is she still on with us?
Yes. So I think, I don't know if that's something we can send out through Parent Square, or I can email whoever wants it, but I'm happy to provide it to the school so that they can just send it out to parents and teachers.
And we have a few more chats there. I think I'm sure that I'm seeing all. I just want to say thank you, Kara, for being our first Endeavor Charter Talk speaker, for being that brave person. I was really worried we were not, going to, like, 30 minutes. How are we going to, but how are we going to get it all in? But you packed a lot into this 30 minutes, and we so appreciate it. Does anybody else have any questions? You can put it in the chat, or you can raise your hand and unmute.
I think everyone's trying to get away so they can go to lunch.
Thanks again, everybody.
Yes.
Have a great day. Please email Kira if you have any questions, concerns, or you'd like any of the resources that she discussed, any, those contact information and whatnot. She'll be happy to get them over to you. Okay.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.